Welcome back to the Clean Energy Edge. I'm Russ Bates, joined by my Canadian co-host, Brian Scott. Brian Scott, how are you?
I'm doing great today, Russ. How are you doing?
No complaints. Everything's fantastic here. Just another day in the good old USA. Lots happening, and we've got something I think everybody is, well, I know everybody in the U.S. is keeping their eyes on, and that's this legislation. It's going through something really important with the clean energy sector. It's part of this big, beautiful bill that they like to call it. It's got it circling through Congress with the clean energy side of it. This could wipe out if they go through, and we're going to talk about each version in both chambers of the Congress. But it could wipe out, 500,000 clean energy jobs in really red GOP districts before the next midterm election, certainly before the presidential election in 2028. So let's unpack that. And part of it I'm seeing is a little bit of gridlock, which I'd be interested to get your take. I think that might be a good thing. But let's start with where we're at today. So today is June 23rd when we're recording this. So the House, they passed their version of the one big beautiful bill, and part of that was very aggressively phasing out the Inflation Reduction Act credits, different kind of time frames, but really cutting it out. Right, it was really a bad deal for the clean energy sector when that was passed. At I want to say 3 in the morning or 2 in the morning or 6 in the morning. I don't know. It wasn't during regular business hours, right? So that went over to the Senate. Now, the Senate is looking at it, right? It's got to be passed by both. Senate writes up and kind of red lines, and they'll send something back. They've been looking at it for a few weeks now, and the goal is to get this thing to the president's desk for signature and pass into law by the 4th of July. Not looking good there. But what the Senate just put out, I think it was June 16th. Let me look at my notes here. Yeah, I think June 16th draft. They came out with what their version was, and it's not much better. It's a little bit better for clean energy, but still not great. So out of the two, the Senate version, the clean energy sector would definitely take. But it still really is a blow for clean energy. So, I mean, Brian, have you been able to see much of this, and what's the take from Canada as far as what's going on with legislation regarding clean energy here in the U.S.?
It's something we see, right, with regulatory changes, whether they're at a federal or provincial, state, or local level. All these regulations can have, or tax implications, can have such a big impact on the energy industry at large, whether it be clean energy or, fossil fuels. This one could be devastating. And I wonder, at a time when you're seeing mass planning for massive projects, even batteries, that really feel like batteries should be those projects that everybody should be able to get behind just for grid stabilization. At a time when there's so much growth in so many parts of the U.S. in not only battery development, but battery construction, it just feels like there's a lot of pushback coming from a lot of areas, and a lot of people that have the potential to lose their jobs pushing back. A lot of congressmen and senators starting to go, well, wait a minute, maybe this is a problem, right? At a time of mass AI implementation, you would think kind of everybody can get on the same page of energy production needs to happen, right? Whether it's drill, baby, drill, or the clean energy side, like slowing down energy production right now is very risky. I think even from a national security standpoint, and you would think that would stick, but maybe we can get just enough debate going on this topic to slow it down.
Yeah, it's one of those things that we need more and more electrons, right? We need more every day. We need more right now in the afternoon when we're recording this than we did this morning when we got up out of bed, right? That's just how this thing is going. So it's not slowing down whatsoever. It's accelerating. And I don't know if if the GOP, the Republican Party, is thinking so much about that, or it feels to me more like it's a uh, more emotional. They didn't, a lot of them didn't, I'm going to say the majority of them for sure, on the Republican side, didn't like the Inflation Reduction Act. They don't like
Yep.
clean energy.
Yep.
They just like fossil fuel or whatever the case is there. But it's more emotional instead of maybe thinking things through of, well, does this make sense or not? I mean, we could go into the fossil fuel piece of it where obviously they're still getting subsidies and all the everything from the government there. Nobody seems to want to talk about that on that side, but I mean that's a fact of the matter too. Now with that, I'll caveat and say after the House version was passed, which there's several things that people are saying they didn't realize was in this 1,000 page document, right? They passed it, and then I guess they got back to read, and it was like, oh wait, AI is in there. I didn't realize that. Maybe that's not a good thing. And there was a letter sent by I think it was 13 House Republicans to the Senate saying, hey, don't gut the Inflation Reduction Act. This is very important for our states. So you know, it's like one of those things they rush it through. They're not really thinking it out as far as the consequences of doing these things. But that's kind of a big deal. I mean, once they sign it into law, there's already so much uncertainty in the U.S. of what's going on with clean energy. The brakes have been tapped pretty hard on a lot of projects, but it definitely hits home.
Yeah. And some areas like California that already has so much job loss in the sector, I don't know how they survive another kick. It's not to say that there won't be, still solar being installed next year in California or anything silly like that. It's just to say that the energy or the industry can become so weak in a local area where, you got enough. We see it here. You get enough demand, and then that drives prices down, right? And then you get to a point where if the industry is just devastated, like you're starting to see, I don't think it's going to help competition. That's for sure. And I think you see these bills get written that are so long and so complicated, and it makes it very difficult for, maybe I shouldn't say difficult, but we see politicians signing off on things and then realizing later, right? Like it's just, there's so much discussion and negotiation and debate for months and months and months. Then a bill comes out and people sign it seemingly without realizing what they're signing. And I mean, people can debate the value of the IRA, but the real kind of brilliant thing to it was the way it was set up and the way so many of those programs got rolled out. They hit a lot of, well, what do we want to say, lower income areas that ended up being Republican districts.
Right.
That pushing back on this is it's not self-serving for the Republicans. It really isn't. It's not going to help their base. And we all know sometimes politicians can sell one thing while doing another. Preaching over, overspending, this, that, and the other thing, which are valuable points. But these could really have a lot of harm on Republican districts, as you've said.
Yeah, it's talking about signing something before you've read it. I remember Nancy Pelosi, I can't remember what the bill was. It was, back, I don't know, 10 years ago. But the famous line that I remembered was her saying, you have to pass the bill before you can see what's in the bill. I'm like, no, that's BS. That's totally wrong. Not right. But it's kind of the same thing here is what they've done. They passed it and then they're reading it and say, well, wait a minute. I didn't realize that was in there. And now they're trying to get a do-over and have the Senate bail them out. Talking about what the Senate has kind of, I'd say, kind of redlined a little bit. Whenever you flip it back on the House side, because it has to come back to the House and they have to agree or redline. It can bounce back and forth like a tennis ball. But I think it was Chip Roy. He said, where is that note? The Senate version is weak and dead on arrival. I don't know if that's a direct quote, but that's kind of what he was getting at.
Sure.
So if what they're talking about in the Senate comes back across to the House, they're going to be fighting it, is what they're talking about, because it is a very thin majority. I mean, Democrats aren't going to vote yes on this, so it's really tight. They need every Republican to be on board. And to your point about these red states, I mean, the impact is really concentrated in these red states. Texas, I mean, they've got tens of thousands, like 30-something thousand jobs. Florida's got over 20,000 jobs, both red states. Arizona, which I believe it went red. It was about 10,000. So I think there's 80-something% ballpark number of these facilities and these projects that are in the GOP voting district. So that's really a big deal. So I guess it kind of gets into what you were saying earlier. Why would any Republican support cuts that risk that many jobs? I mean, 300, 400, 500,000, mostly in these conservative districts. I mean, that doesn't make much sense at all. If I'm a Republican senator or congressman having to go back for the 2026 midterms, and I've got a bunch of people I put out of work by a vote I cast.
It's hard to see it, in my view, as anything but voting in support of an ideology, or, you know, the donors that are supporting your campaign or the Republicans' campaign, as far as just not being in support of clean energy, as opposed to your voters, right? Like, those are all, if they're jobs, they're probably going to be voting age people, right? And you take their jobs. Some people are convinced by politicians quite easily, but if you lost your job based off of government policy, it would be difficult to support that person in the midterms.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that puts a big bullseye on them. From, whether it's labor unions, which, that's one thing, but even open shop or non-union, factories, things like that, it's going to really hit them hard if these things happen. And thus, again, the election isn't that far away. I mean, we're already almost, halfway through 2025. And I guess it kind of gets into, there's a bit of a calendar crunch. So timing is going to be everything. Again, they were talking about wanting to have something to the president's desk to sign into law, meaning it passed in Congress by July 4th. Latest I'm hearing is the Senate is expected to vote on this before the July 4th recess. But we don't know if they will or not. I mean, right now we've also got the Iran situation, right? So that's a big deal. That's going to complicate things even more. So we'll see. But then you get into the summer break, right? Which is, basically they're going to be off most of July, I think. They would get back in August, beginning of August, and go through till, I guess, around Labor Day, things like that. But in my mind, every day that goes by that they haven't got this figured out, that it's not passed and headed to the president's desk, is a day closer to that 2026 midterm election, which to me bodes pretty well for nothing happening. Because if I'm a senator or congressman, I know if as time gets closer, I'm going to be less likely to do something that's going to make me vulnerable for that election.
It's kind of that like lame duck president sort of thing we quite often see.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like you get to that end of your term or whatever, and it's very difficult to accomplish things. I think what you often see in the U.S. is you have that 4-year presidential term, you had the midterms in the middle, and that first year is kind of your path, especially if you have majority in Congress and Senate, to get big things done. And to your point, the war in Iran really is dividing the Republican Party and even the Democratic Party to a certain degree. It just feels like that's going to take precedence. It feels like it's going to be really hard for them to get this done soon. And to your point, the longer this goes, the less likely it is to even happen. And when you think that Trump took this giant risk, it was an enormous legislative risk, in my view, to try and say, let's put this all on one bill. Because if you can't get this done, you can't say you've done anything, right? Like if you've governed by executive order. That's all that he can claim if this bill can't get across. And it's kind of shocking because there was a lot of things in there that were, I think, controversial, but at the same time, a lot of things that I thought would pass quite easily given the people voting.
Yeah, it makes me wonder because it seems, and it still seems now, but maybe a little bit less so because we are seeing some more GOP folks kind of talk out about it. I mentioned the letter with the 13 congressional Republicans in support of the clean energy tax incentives and everything that goes with that. But yeah, you're right. There's a lot of stuff that's in this, clean energy is a big part, and that's what we talk about on this pod, right? But there's also Medicaid, there's also, SNAP, food benefits. There's a lot of stuff in there that is not popular. I don't know, it depends on the latest poll, but it's like a majority of people polled are not for this thing. Not just the clean energy part or the Medicaid. Everybody's got their reasons for they don't like it, or maybe they do like it. But I would say overall, it's not very popular. I think as more information comes out about it, people learn more about it. I think they're contacting their congressional leaders, but there's still so much that I'm surprised with as far as Congress just kind of saying, whatever you want, Mr. President, we'll do it. And whenever I was in DC back in February, that was very evident. It's like, hey, yeah, we may like the clean energy tax incentives, but hey, if the guy down the street here says that's what we need to get rid of, then that's what we'll do.
It's, how do you say it? It's so difficult to get a group of people to all agree on something. It's not that difficult in general for a ruling party to get a majority, but it's the more issues and policy you stack in there, the probability of agreement to pass something becomes more difficult, obviously, right? And then you go for this big, beautiful bill, as he wants to call it, and it just gets more and more difficult. And then you have big things like Iran going on in the background, which is dividing people. It just feels it feels like he stacked the deck against himself without really realizing, because he felt that it was going to be like they really hit the ground running this time around, right? Compared to last time around when he took office, where they kind of felt disorganized. They hit the ground, they signed a pile of executive orders, and they were like, we're doing X, Y, Z. And they were very clear on what they wanted, very clear on what they wanted at Congress. And they had Doge out there cutting and slashing. But it just feels like it's not going to end well. You know what I mean? It's hard to picture this ending well. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the big, beautiful bill is going to pass before they go on vacation, and everything will be fine for them, and it'll be a big win. Maybe the fiscal conservatives, even like both of ourselves, maybe we'll see the value in some of the cuts and some of the tax cuts for the wealthy. Maybe the economy will get going and he'll be able to look back on it and look like a genius. Like some of the Trump supporters I know just very much believe it's a cycle in the economy. The economy is going to come down a little bit. All his works, all these policies he wants are going to get passed. Interest rates are going to drop. Before the end of the year, the U.S. economy will be as good as it's ever been. Time's going to tell, though.
Yeah, that's one way that people might look at it. I would say, to me, I can't say that there's anything that I like in that big, beautiful bill, and it's hard for me to even call it that. But going with that terminology, it just doesn't make much sense for a lot of reasons. If you dive into the Medicaid piece, it's like they're saying, well, we're going to have cuts in Medicaid from the people who shouldn't be on that. Oh, okay. But is it that many hundreds of billions of dollars that's really out there. I don't know. I haven't seen anything to prove it. And same thing with clean energy tax credits. I think that may be more emotional, especially if I'm in a red state, if I'm in Texas, and I've got a lot of more clean energy going in there than any other state, including California. It's beating California now with clean energy implementation. It just doesn't, it's not a good idea. It just, it's kind of cutting your nose off to spite your face type of thinking. But we'll see. So I guess that brings us to right now. I guess it's kind of some gridlock. Again, it passed in the House. It's over in the Senate. The Senate's been looking at it for a while. They're saying in their minds, hopefully by July 4th, they'll get something back over to the House. So even if they get it, by July 4th, we're June 23rd. So even if they do that, the House still has to take their time and look at it. And from what we're hearing, if it's anything like what they're saying, they're not going to like it. So long story short, I think it comes into a little bit of gridlock, which to me, in this case, gridlock equals growth for the clean energy sector. Yeah, and if this doesn't go through, it's kind of the status quo will prevail. That's the way I look at it. Now, I'm not saying they can't say, all right, we're going to pass something else to totally try to gut these things. I think that would be even harder for most Republicans to get behind. Sure. That have that in their states and they're seeing the benefits, especially when we're talking about needing all the energy, like what you mentioned earlier, and all of the above approach. That makes so much sense. But the speed of deployment with clean energy compared to fossil fuel, compared to certainly nuclear, you add those things up, it's like, gosh, we should really clear the runway and get as much of this out as possible, and not be putting up these barriers.
It's one of those things, like I think I'm sure you would agree, right? It's larger projects, certainty is such a big thing, right? Like it's very difficult to get large projects through based on the premise of something like the IRA still being in place. But on a smaller or average size project, residential and commercial, let's say, if there's enough gridlock that an American family or business owner can go, well, this is still going to be around for at least 6 months. I can still take advantage of this. Scarcity, it sells, right? As they say in marketing. And if people feel like this opportunity is still here, we thought it was going to be gone, but it might be gone in 6 months. You might see a big inrush of projects happening, right? Which could be really good for all those workers that are afraid of losing their jobs and companies afraid of survival. That would be great to see. And it might be, just what politicians need to see to go, oh, wait a minute, what are we doing here? Right? Like if
it could be like tariffs, right? The threat of tariffs made everybody going, let's stock up on the things that we need before the tariffs hit them, right? We saw that in the U.S. There was a big kind of uptick in people buying stuff.
Yep, cars, I heard especially.
Cars, yeah, cars. I don't know, baby dolls, pencils, things like that. Trump talked about. So, whatever. I'm being facetious there, but yeah, it's you make a good point that a lot of people could say, let's go ahead and do this. I guess the pushback I would see is if the system has to be online, then that could be tougher. Residential, that would make sense. For a lot of the C&I and certainly these utility scale projects wouldn't really go. But I don't know. Again, it comes down to what's actually passed in there. And again, I'm hoping it just dies and the industry just moves on with what the IRA has in place, knowing that runway is still in effect.
It really makes you wonder kind of the impact. And I don't think we were planning on talking about the Iranian war today, but it's kind of fallen on our doorstep, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It makes you wonder because of the things that the things that can happen out of an event like this, out of, Trump attacking Iran. And I feel like you could argue, I feel like a practical person could argue both sides of that, benefit, not a good, good idea, bad idea, as far as why he did that. But I think one thing that has to be acknowledged is something could happen as some sort of retaliatory measure, whether it be the Strait of Hormuz, whether it be something. I don't think Iran can really defend itself, if I'm being honest, not to get into war theory, but things can happen in the world that can be bad for the economy, just like we saw with Ukraine, right?
Right.
Can impact energy prices, which is bad for the economy. And Iran has more of an ability to do that than the Ukrainian war really did, in my view. I know I've seen a lot of people say, well, like North America, we don't rely on Iranian oil or oil coming through the Strait of Hormuz. It doesn't really matter to us. Well, markets are markets, right? If a barrel costs $150 tomorrow, then that's what it costs. It doesn't matter if we have lots of it. It just kind of is what it is. I remember a little off path here, but I remember a guy I've known for quite a few years who worked in oil for years, and telling the story where he was in Kuwait in oil development when the first Gulf War happened. And he was literally on a satellite phone trying to buy as much oil futures as possible, because all of a sudden in the middle of the night, he realized this was happening. And he made a pile of money because he realized this war was going to shoot up oil prices.
Yep. Yeah.
And we've seen that already, right? Which is, further incentive for stable things like solar panels, right? Your solar panels on your roof don't cost more when the price of any of the minerals that are in them go up in price or down. But what the things that could happen out of an event like this could have negative economic consequences, which could make it very difficult for politicians to support policies that diminish job growth or even maintain jobs.
Yeah, those are excellent points, Brian. Whenever we're talking about oil prices, people think, well, what's happening, halfway across the world got to do with me here in the U.S.? It has a lot to do. I think Trump has already put out a couple tweets or his True Social thing saying, "Don't raise oil prices." Well, it's a supply and demand thing. I mean, it's a free market. I guess if you're in certain countries, maybe they could say that, but here, I don't think it'll work that way. And I did hear right before we got on to record, I saw a report, and I didn't really get into it, but I think Iran has already struck militarily against the U.S. I've got to see that, so don't take that for the gospel, but I think they've already launched an attack somewhere in the Middle East at a U.S. base. So, but to your point, I think the Strait of Hormuz is going to be a big indicator of what's going to happen. The other thing is that Iran does a lot of business with China, and China wants that oil. So I don't know, maybe they'll just send stuff over to China. I don't know how that would all work. That's not my area of expertise, but they've kind of got to weigh those things out too. But I think it's over 50% chance right now that the people are thinking by the end of the year that strait is going to have some type of closure or something that restricts the amount of ships that can come through carrying oil.
Yeah, it's just the U.S. had the capacity to knock that out like no one else did. That was very clear. But it's the what happens next, how will Iran react? Because it doesn't necessarily become a typical logical equation of Iran realizing they can't win this. And I think that's partially because there's religious implications of a religious country, right? And that's not to diminish any religion, just to say that if that's how they're thinking, if a martyrdom is a reward, how do you negotiate with that? I don't.
Yeah, and they do a lot of cyber attack type of terrorism work too, which, my gosh, that's a big deal. It's a lot bigger today than it was a decade or certainly 20 years ago. So they've got a lot of of options on things to do, unfortunately. We'll have to see. But all this kind of circling back all adds to more of that gridlock, and maybe something, if this wasn't going on and a few of these other things, there's always something happening, in the US right now with this administration. Maybe that's not the highest priority to get this piece of legislation pushed through. And it becomes more and more difficult when you've already got a controversial piece of legislation. You've already got people saying, wait, I didn't know this was in there. You won't have my vote whenever it comes back, or however that ends up playing out. So, I mean, from the clean energy, looking through that lens only, and what's happening in that sector, these things could all maybe work, in that benefit of maybe nothing coming through there, I guess.
Can very much be a no news is good news scenario.
Yeah.
I think one thing Trump has always very clearly understood in my mind was he needs to have wins, and he will make them up, claim wins that might not necessarily be his or be there. But I think he very much understands he needs wins. And if this gets stuck to a point where he feels like it can't be solved, maybe this bill gets broken up, maybe he shifts priorities, just about anything, right? I think this could all go away if it looks bad enough.
Yeah. And right now it's not looking great. It's not looking great at all. I mean, just what's in there looks terrible in my view from what I've seen on it. I'm not saying there's not some good things in there. I'm sure there probably are. I just don't know. What the specifics are of them. So I haven't heard about them, but yeah, time will tell. I mean, I guess it really comes down to this congressional confusion and, say, a ticking clock. It may be handing clean energy a bit of a reprieve. Maybe in the short term, maybe for, from now on, it'll be out there. So we'll be watching, seeing what happens, the next few weeks and months. And, we'll share some updates, on the next episode. Sound good to you, Brian?
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
All right. Well, everybody smash that subscribe button. Follow us. Check us out. We've got a YouTube channel now. You want to check that out. So follow us there. Also on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, Amazon, Apple, all of these places. Come and join the Clean Energy Edge, and tell us what you think. We appreciate it. Thanks so much.